So, in the last 25 years or so, something has been an absolutely enormous, huge, popular, a very in topic to discuss in regards to teenagers is or was peer pressure. For a while there, it seemed like every single TV show and movie about young people was focused on peer pressure. And it also became a really hot topic for research. So combined, we were really left with the impression that having to deal with peers in a negative way was a normal part of adolescence that everybody should expect, at least at some point. So that if it didn't happen, it was kind of surprising. Now, your text makes the point, which I personally really agree with, that instead of the term peer pressure, a more accurate one is friend influence. As I've already said, there's a difference between peers and friends. They're not the same thing. And peers are not likely to have much of an effect on you. It's your friends who are going to affect you. They're going to influence you. And another reason the term peer pressure is not accurate is because it naturally implies negativity. Being pressured to do something means you're not doing it on your own of your own volition. You have to be pressured to do it. And the influence of your friends is not necessarily negative. Now, when I think of friends, or when I think of peer pressure, I think of friends influencing each other in a negative way. I automatically think of somebody being pressured to drink or being pressured regarding drugs or being pressured regarding sex, all negative situations. But as the text indicates, while this is certainly true, friends can also encourage each other in terms of discouraging risky behavior, so it can go both ways. Whether the influence of friends is positive or negative, in both ways, the influence will become much stronger in early adolescence, peak in the mid-teens, and then decline in late adolescence. Now, yes, I know this is not a picture of teenagers or adolescents, um, but this is just, demonstrating how your friends can have a positive influence. And it makes sense as well that research indicates there's a connection between the amount of risky behavior a young person reports themselves and the amount of risky behavior they report for their friends. Because remember that you tend to be friends with people who are similar to you, so this makes sense. If you have a 17-year-old boy who likes to drink and party on the weekends, he smokes, he likes to drive really fast, well, he's going to want to be friends with people who are similar to him. But, and this is important, the question is then, does having these friends who are interested in certain things cause you to be more interested in them than if they were not your friends? So for example, maybe that 17-year-old boy is just interested in cars and driving fast because of his friend's influence. And then because of them and their influence, he starts drinking and smoking. Well, the answer to that is no, we can't say that. Correlation does not imply causation. In other words, just because two things are happening at the same time does not mean that one is causing the other. We can't say with certainty that our 17-year-old boy starts smoking and drinking because of who he hangs around with. We just can't, which I'm sure many parents would not like and would disagree with. My little boy would never do those things if it wasn't for the kids he hangs around with. Well, sorry, mom and dad, but correlation does not imply causation. And remember, we have this little issue of selective association, meaning most people, including adolescents, tend to choose friends who are similar to themselves. That's a fact. We want to be friends with people who are similar to us. Those are the people we try to be friends with. So not only does research indicate this, but it just makes sense that when a young person participates in risky behavior, they select their friends, at least in part, on the basis that those people also participate in the same risky behavior. And the same goes for the opposite. Now, does this mean friends have no influence? Absolutely not. But it's both selective association and influence that contributes to similarities in risky behavior. Now, your textbook cites a study about smoking to demonstrate how this can result in friends having a positive influence as well. And to me, this is a really clear example because people who don't smoke tend to really dislike smoking. It's not just, oh, I'm a non-smoker. Non-smokers tend to have very strong feelings about smoking. So in the study cited, adolescents who didn't smoke said that they really thought their friends would disapprove if they started smoking, indicating that their friend influence could be positive. So, friends' influence is one part of the story for some young people in terms of why they participate in risky behavior, but it's only one part. Now, when we, meaning everyday people not focused on academics, talk about adolescence, we tend to use some words interchangeably when we really shouldn't. There's really a difference, such as peers and friends, and such as a crowd and a clique. A crowd is a social category. It is a large group of people. And there's generally 5 major types of crowds in adolescence. This doesn't mean that every crowd will be found in every school, but these really are the most common. So in most schools, you're going to have a group of kids that are referred to as the elites. And the 80s referred to them as preppies. This is the crowd in a school that is acknowledged as having the highest social status, the most popular group that most of the school looks up to. After that, we have the athletes. These are another crowd, also referred to as jocks. And obviously, these are the students in a school who are really sports oriented. Now, you might wonder, what is the difference between an athletic crowd and an athletic clique, which we're going to talk about in a second? The athletic crowd is kind of all of the athletes, the big group. We're not getting into particulars here. Another crowd in most school are the kids that are academics. They might be called the brains, the nerds, the geeks, clearly concerned with getting good grades, and because of their focus on their studies, they usually have a reputation for being socially inept, kind of socially awkward, and sometimes not being very social at all. Another group found in most high schools are the deviants, also referred to as the druggies. Our common terms in the 80s were burnouts or stoners. These are kids who attend school who have no interest in it whatsoever. They're not academically oriented at all. They're not athletically oriented at all. All they're focused on is partying and drinking. And then we have the 5th group, which is essentially everybody else, the others. Sometimes they might be referred to as the normals or the nobodies, but when the term nobody is used, that doesn't mean they don't have a noticeable, distinctive group of friends and that they're actually nobody. These are students who simply don't stand out in any particular way. They don't stand out in a really positive way, but they also don't stand out in a really negative way. So these are the 5 large groupings you'll usually find at most schools. But then we have smaller individual cliques. And going back to the example of athletes, there may be cliques of football players or hockey players, people who do track, cheerleaders, and so forth. When we talk about a clique, we mean that is your small, immediate group of close friends. May only be 3 people, maybe up to 12 people, but generally not more than 12. And as I said, stereotypically, we think of a clique as having a very definite personality, don't we? But it doesn't have to have some kind of particular characteristic. It may simply be a group of friends who identify with each other, who know each other well, simple as that. Now, what all of these do, both crowds and cliques, and they do really have a purpose because they help you figure out who you are and who you want to be. I don't mean too hokey in how I say that. But what they do is they help students, they help adolescents develop their own identity through experiences with each other, through experiences at the school. They help them define their identity and figure out who they are as people. We think about what other people think of us. Sometimes we are correct in what we think they think of us, and sometimes we misinterpret what we think people think of us. But either way, this affects our identity. Remember the idea of the imaginary audience, thinking that everybody's paying attention to what you do. Maybe you're familiar with the concept of the looking glass self from Charles Horton Cooley. This is all about how we think other people think of us and how that affects us. So crowds and cliques are absolutely going to have an effect, and sometimes a lifelong lasting effect on an adolescent as they develop and grow up. Now, unfortunately, something happens in adolescence, that the ability for something happens, and it can make understanding who you are as a person a little bit more difficult because of the cognitive development that takes place in adolescence. We also develop the ability for sarcasm. And sometimes this sarcasm and ridicule can have a negative effect on us in terms of interacting with our crowds and interacting with our cliques. So make sure you pay attention to that when you're reviewing this in the textbook. Now, as I said, there's a lot of information today in this chapter. On one hand, for me anyways, a lot of the information, I feel like students would know it before they read the chapter and listened to the lecture because of personal experiences. Now, the terms might be different, the words to describe what's going on might be different, phrased differently, but at the same time, you're familiar with the content. On the other hand, I feel like some of it might seem really completely new just because of the way it's presented, and we're not really used to thinking of adolescents and teens in such a structured, formal way, are we? So just take your time. Remember, you don't need to listen to the lectures all at once. You don't have to do things all at once. Don't forget to do your quiz for this chapter. And as always, if you have any questions, just shoot me an email.